Well, hello everyone. I think I have all the tech bugs ironed out. Solid Ground is back. So lovely to join you all this morning. To first timers, welcome. Solid Ground is where we have a bit of a chat for 30 minutes or so around the various political, cultural and social issues of the day. And as the name suggests, on a good solid ground of philosophical, ethical and a bit of political nous, if I could put it that way. But we're also about, we're all about double entendres or puns in this job. And so Solid Ground's also about a good cup of coffee. And I have my logoed mug here, and I now know, because I've couriered them myself, along with some of the admin team here at Family First, that there are these Solid Ground mugs. Whoops, going the wrong way. Always got to remember these cameras are on mirrored images. These mugs are all across New Zealand now. So if you're logging in this morning, always know you can jump onto the Family First Facebook page or the YouTube site, Family First YouTube, and put in a comment. It'll come live to me here in the studio. So say good morning, just like Gillian has from beautiful Kerry. Tell me, let me know you're alive. Let me know you're there, because of course, when I'm doing this in the production studio, I can't actually see who is or isn't online, but I can get messages, as I say, through the Family First Facebook page or YouTube. And so send us your message, say g'day, and with that, obviously, any thoughts or questions as we discuss a range of topics this morning. As I say, the tech is all working. A big thanks to some of the Family First crew who helped out. It was a real meltdown last week, and as you could probably see on my face, beyond my competency to fix it, I thought, I can sort this. But great to have you all along. There are no shortage of topics to speak on, and the good news, of course, is things we don't cover here. Bob and I will be sorting things on Wednesday for political playback. So that's another live show that Family First does. In fact, we do at least 3 live shows a week, and a whole lot of others too, like McBlog. So more about that at the end. Ian's just letting us know he's in lovely Lower Hutt. I may have mentioned before that's where my wife lived for a while, strictly in Ipuni. The lovely Rosie there in Taupo. It's always good to see familiar faces. So Rosie, I think we've got it together this time. So that's a good thing. So guys, where to even start at the moment? But I thought I'd start mainly in New Zealand this week, and actually quite a lot around life issues. I'm hot to trot on life issues, and I just thought this was one of the striking things in recent days. I was going to share this with you last week. I've got to say hello to Lynette. See, this is for viewers. You always know I get distracted by the comments. So Lynette is one of, I'm going to out you, Lynette. You are one of the people who have my mug, which is tremendous. So thank you all for that. And we've got RP coming through as well. Lovely to have you here. So good morning. So yes, this little story here. The strange oddity of New Zealand, of taking that mountain and turning it into a person while denying the personhood of an unborn child. It's so simple and profound that the fact that we do this stuff is, to be honest with you, bordering on ridiculous. To be fair, I was there when this when this first happened. This was a novelty of Chris Finlayson, and no disrespect to him, but lawyers seem to like doing novel things for the sake of novelty, and that was to give, at that time, legal personhood, to make a person the Whanganui River. And so successive governments have carried on from there. And I've always thought, and I raised it at the time, clearly unsuccessfully, I thought this was a stupid idea philosophically and practically. Practically speaking, once you give personhood to a non-living entity, what happens if you kick the mountain or someone accidentally starts a fire? Is that a form of manslaughter? And at one level you can rightly argue, this is all just absurd. But I found in my time in politics, what looks like simple symbolic changes can often be taken a lot further, again by lawyers and activists who really try to stretch things out. And, if you wanted to be sort of quite crude about it, think about everything these days, which is a treaty issue. Just about everything now is a treaty issue. And so when you turn a mountain into a person, as I say, I think you create a whole lot of legal problems into the future. but I think philosophically it's a problem as well. Personhood is about real breathing, if you will, natural persons. And when you start to water that down, you actually do damage to people in general. That might be to some stretch in the idea, but if we start including, if you will, non-persons as persons, you actually diminish what it means to be human. In fact, I've got an interview coming up in a few weeks as part of Family Matters with a gentleman called Wesley J. Smith. He's a bioethicist, a philosopher, and a lawyer. Rather smart cookie from the United States. And he and I are going to be talking about human exceptionalism, which means that we as humans are exceptional. We're not animals. We're certainly not mountains. And I know he would have a real problem with this concept. So a bad piece of law, the idea that somehow this person gets represented now by a board of people, obviously a mixture of iwi and others. I mean, at one level that makes sense. So why not just appoint a board to, if you will, represent the mountain's interests without calling it a person? And then, as your good question coming here from one Len, he's asking, when were corporations given a form of personhood and why? Good point. So in law, we have, in a sense, natural persons. That's people like yourself and myself, Len, or people like Rosie and Amanda. I see Chris Denby's here, and Amanda from the Waitangi Rapper. Lovely to have you along. So all of us on here today are natural persons. In law, we also have persons that can be trusts or corporations. They're a form of entity or person. But what's happening here with the mountain is making it a natural person. That's the slight distinction. And no, I'm no lawyer, so people can critique me if I'm wrong. But as I say, we do have variety of persons. If you set up a company, if you certainly set up a trust, it's seen as a person. But we, like myself talking, are natural persons. It's actually an important distinction in the law. But what the government's done here, as it's done with the Whanganui River, is given it natural personhood, which then brings us to that second absurdity, which is the unborn child, which is obviously, biologically, scientifically, definitively, and all the other lees, a human being, a real exceptional human being, actually living and breathing, because look, we're not animists. That mountain is not alive in the same way that a human being is, unless you believe in mythology and not science. Let's be blunt about that. You know, a child is a living, breathing, or soon to be human being. And yet it's got no rights in this country. In fact, you can kill that child right up to birth. And we also know, shockingly, in this country, that members of Parliament and including the current administration, are more than happy that the baby be killed after birth. So it's really quite shocking and disturbing. But you know what? It's just very, very sad. And Rosie nails it. I mean, she's summed it up better than I have. Really, we should have Rosie on here. I just talk too much. She just cuts to the chase. One of my colleagues, I won't out who I suspect it is, knowing that we can hear me, which is always a good step forward. The team know that there's at least two reasons. Like last week, a meltdown of the system, where other times I haven't unmuted myself. Princess Adora is saying up to birth. If we're referencing abortion in New Zealand, it's perfectly legal to abort a child right up to birth. But we also know, because I was the one who put a bill forward into Parliament, that even when a baby is born, and we know that babies are born alive through botched abortions, that the baby is not to be given medical care. So we have instances where babies are actually born completely separated from the mother and are left to die. It's pretty odious. And in fact, I've got an interview this week with an abortion survivor. Someone who actually has survived an abortion. So I will share that a little bit later in the program. Quickly say hello to Rosina down there in the Kapiti Coast. Amanda notes it is a bit ridiculous, but this is the absurdities which are creeping into New Zealand at the moment, which it doesn't end well. I mean, people often hear me say that, but when you introduce these absurdities, it doesn't end well. And part of it too is when you end up with massive contradictions. And you know, here's a good example, a different story. So this was in the news a few days ago, do with the Ministry of Social Development, a very sad situation. This is a family who went to the Ministry of Social Development or Work and Income to get a funeral grant And if you know anything about the Ministry of Social Development, you can get grants for funerals. And traditionally, I mean, obviously you have to have low income to qualify, but traditionally the funds would pay for basically the, a bit heavy for this time of the morning, but the coffin, funeral directorships and so forth. But long and short, this lady's taken the case right to the Supreme Court to say that the Ministry of Social Development should also be paying for all the food. And the court has agreed. The court has said, no, it's right that actually within, in this case, Māori tangihanga, that food's an important part of a funeral ceremony, and so the Ministry of Social Development should pay for it. But why I'm pointing this out as an example of absurdity is I don't know any culture in the world when it comes to funerary or funeral rites where food is not important. I mean, in the last year, without being too facetious about it, I've buried more people than I can count almost on one hand. And at every funeral, food is important. So why I'm sharing this with you is firstly, I feel sorry for the family. And obviously any support we as a community can give to those in need is important. Secondly, this is going to come with an enormous cost. So I'm putting more of a political economics hat on here. But every time our courts say, oh yes, we should expand how much is paid or what is paid in the likes of funeral grants, that's more taxpayer money. And I noted in the judgment, they were saying, well, you can get up to $2,000 or something in a funeral grant, and most people are only taking half of that. Well, that's actually not a bad thing. When government set limits on spending, these are not targets to aim for, because this is all your money. The government itself just has to tax us, as we know, far too much to pay for everything. But the third part I thought was the headline here, that no special privilege was conferred. I thought that was absolutely a load of rubbish, because what the court's suggesting in its judgment is that this is particularly for iwi and Pacifica communities. And I just think that's insulting. And it's, again, part of these absurdities coming into our society. Because I don't, as I said at the start, know of any culture that doesn't, if you will, celebrate the life of a loved one without food. And so, again, it just annoys me, actually, because basically media, in this case, saying it's not so, or the court saying that there's no special privilege, while clearly giving a special privilege to one group based on race is just, again, absurd. And it just doesn't bode well. And I remember debating years ago with a minister who had just drafted a report, and it was talking, again, in this case, around culture. And here in New Zealand, it was talking about Pacifica and Maori cultures and saying that they put the child at the centre of the family. And I had quite an argument with the minister, because I said, again, I don't know of any culture that doesn't put children at the centre of the family. In fact, I said to her, found it actually quite an insult to suggest that somehow centering your family around the child is not the normal, broad human thing to do. So, yeah, I mean, it's just absurd. Rosie nails it here, the old hot chips. Yeah, as I say, my mother-in-law's passed away, a good friend of mine just passed away suddenly recently, my father's died. At every one of them, there's effectively a wake at the end. I come from an Irish Catholic stock, should the Ministry of Social Development be paying for all our whiskey to farewell our loved ones? So, again, there's a cost, but I suppose amongst other things, and it's why you can't trust the mainstream media, and in some ways coming now through the judiciary, to say no special privilege conferred, and yet this is only going to apply to Māori tangihanga practices is, as I say, as stupid as it is insulting, because all of us celebrate in that way. And you get a similar thing. I'm not going to go too long on this one, but Ashburton School got beaten up in the papers because I think, strangely, actually, they did take these punamu off some of the kids at school. So they must have a dress code rule there that says no jewellery. And I suspect, I don't know, but I really stress that to you guys, I don't know definitively. The article didn't quite expand on it. The article was basically just beating up the school because it was punamu. But my point is, if you turned up with a Christian cross, Islamic hijab or something, what would happen? And I suspect, again, we're seeing this sort of two-tiered dynamic starting, that somehow jewellery wrong. I suspect, again, Christian crosses, Buddhist symbols are all wrong. But if it's punamu, it's okay. In the same way with this story before, that, food at funerals should be paid for one group but not another. And, Rosina here nails it. It's divisive. And so this, again, is just not particularly helpful, guys, and it's not really part of the narrative. And what bothered me about this one is, interesting, the Pounamu, I think it's toku. It's in like an axe shape to build and create as part of the symbolism. But it's just this two-tiered dynamic in a media that's reporting as much to warn everybody else, do not call into question what's happening if it's something like this. So again, if you've got a school with rules, for example, you say, look, haircut should only be to you. When I went to a Catholic school, hair never touched your collar. We've already had arguments over recent years, if you remember. People saying, well, no, it's cultural for me to have it long. Well, go and set up your own school, to be honest. If you want a school that allows jewellery of all shapes and form, go and set that up. We're allowed to have rules. And when we do make rules, such as this one around funeral grants, then it applies to everybody. So, yeah, it's just silly. But I still think this is the funniest thing here. We should have, for Rosie's mum's passing, and sorry, of course, with your mum's passing, Rosie, that we should have been funding the hot chips. So yeah, there's all of that. And look, it's heavy topics, but this, speaking of media and how they misrepresent things and why we run shows like this. This was in the Herald last week, and actually Bob and I talked about it briefly on Political Playback. So you read the headline, and what we know actually from a lot of the research at the moment, guys, is most people only read the headlines. So from this, you would think that someone was in a hospice or a retirement village, was dying, wanted assisted suicide, and was denied it. Actually, what happened is that this person, very sadly, was dying, was being supported by hospice in their own home. You heard me correctly on that, in their own home. But they didn't want to be terminated in their own home. The family were insisting that this man, as it was to be moved into a hospice. Now, hospice doesn't believe in euthanasia. They see it as the antithesis or the opposite of healthcare. Hospice, and many of you will have been involved with them, as I have. You care and love for the person to the end. You don't end their life. And the other factor, really important to understand, is for everyone else going to hospice, you want to know and they want to know that they're going to be cared for to the end. If hospices start terminating some patients, there'll always be that niggling in one's mind that actually is the doctor coming to cure me or kill me, to put it rather bluntly. So it's quite right that hospices don't do this. They're right. But the government's trying to change this, and that's part of the sub-narrative to this. So the key, though, is this person wanted to force themselves onto a hospice to die. They didn't want to die in their own home for whatever reasons, and the family members who are up in arms and went racing off to media cleared. I'm going to take a sip of water because I'm going to lose my voice. So as I say, big headline, bashing up on the hospices. Why did the family, who were bleating to the media, not bring their dad to their own homes? Why did they not terminate their father in his own house? Now, personally, I don't particularly like euthanasia, as you know. But these were the questions that the journalists didn't ask nor reported on. The family clearly don't want to have the termination of their loved one in their own homes, probably because they don't want the memory, but more than happy to force other groups. And this is the irony, because of course the government, or the review, to be fair, coming out of the Ministry of Health, says that actually hospices and doctors should be forced to participate in euthanasia. So this great concept of personal choice, that I can kill myself when I want to, is now seeing the strong arm of the state needing to be exercised to force people to kill other people. It's as crude and as blunt as that. But I just thought, again, misreporting, and would encourage you guys that when you do see these headlines, be really skeptical about what you're reading and read further. Don't believe the headlines is really what I'm trying to say to you guys. And that's really, really important. And then I thought I'd share this little video. I tried to do it last week and we ran into trouble. It's from a select committee hearing last week where Māori and Green MPs pick on the Minister for Children, Karen Chor. And why I want to share this with you is because it's in the context of caring for children and abuse that happens to children in state care. And there's 2 points that I want you to, well, you can take as many points from it as you want, but 2 points that you might want to take from it. One is they're talking about abuse, but the Māori Party MP in particular is herself quite abusive. So the irony or hypocrisy is of note. And the second is how, in this case, culture trumps the good of the child, which again, harking back to what we were discussing earlier about putting the child at the centre. It's funny how all of a sudden that becomes secondary to what she's discussing. But I'll play it for you, and why I do it is I'm just struck how the New Zealand Parliament is becoming more and more aggressive, less polite for sure, and abusive. And as I say, I found it quite ironic, if not hypocritical, although we've seen it a few times now, the abusive nature that is coming from the likes of these Greens and Māori Party MPs who just think they know it all. But make your own mind up. I'll just play it now.
Ancestry or tupuna conversation or whakapapa is that very often in your rhetoric you refer to ancestry cannot matter more than the safety of a mokopuna, which is an absolute abhorrent to tikanga. It is abhorrent to Māori. It is abhorrent to the way in which we see the world. So we're already compromised. Your model is already compromises the value and the essence of being mokopuna Māori. Different to mokopuna Pākehā, different to mokopuna Hainamana, different to mokopuna Pasifika. So how in your institutionalized, individualized, using your words, process, does your system, an institutionalized system, understand that and respond to it in an enduring way? Because it doesn't sound like it.
Look, I have to disagree with most of what you've said, and you're entitled to say it, but I actually disagree with most of what you've said.
Because you've got a gap of knowledge, Minister. You don't understand the essence of being Māori.
We're actually at
you
time,
don't
so
understand
let the Minister answer.
So I mean...
Quite extraordinary, I think, particularly at the end, that one, in this case, a Māori woman, is speaking to another, because Karen Chor is Māori as well, insulting her. And I personally, if you see the whole thing, we don't have time for it, it's actually quite abusive. And it's one of the things, again, speaking as a former politician, I have a great concern, actually, particularly around the Māori Party and the Greens, and it goes into every party, but they seem to have it in spades as an arrogance of the highest level that they know everything. And again, aggressive, abusive arrogance, and ironically talking about the care of children. And maybe that MP might reflect why children have to be taken off families in the first place. That's vitally important. And so that's just the comment there. It's a simple thing, but it just frustrated me when I saw it. I thought, again, this is at least the second, if not third time that these MPs and their parties have abused Karen Chor. You don't have to agree with the ACT Party. I disagree with most of what they do. But I've got actually a lot of respect for Karen as someone who's actually shared a lot of her life and experience into the Parliament. And here she is actually, trying to help children and putting children first. And we've talked about this before in terms of, it was called the Section 7AA that they're trying to remove. Thank you, Ethel. They're trying to remove I've lost my train of thought. 7AA is in the Oranga Tamariki, which says culture has to trump what's good for the child. And so it's just completely out of whack. And again, I'm probably belaboring the point, but I just thought it was quite striking. Again, aggressive, abusive, arrogance to think that, she knew best. Because she could just waffle on a whole lot of words. And again, racial division, if you noted that as well. Everything's different based on culture. That's just classic intersectionality, classic Marxism. So, yeah. And then speaking of absurdity, look, I think the theme today is absurdity. I don't know if you saw this. The BNZ Bank is trying to debank coal companies. Kudos actually to New Zealand First. I see in the last 24 hours they've tabled a bill to stop this. But this should be a warning to everyone, not just about the madness around climate change and how, in this case, a bank is trying to strong-arm in this case coal mines and companies. So let's be really clear. What they're wanting to do is stop the banking of a coal company by 2030 in this case. Just in the same way they disagreed with Gloria Vale, which I must say I do as well. There's a whole lot of weird things going on, but stopping someone's access to banking is pretty fundamental. And the point you just need to ask yourselves here is what and who's next. The BNZ tomorrow decides they don't like family first. We're taking away your banking. We don't actually like Christian churches. We don't like your values. You're not inclusive enough. Boom, we're taking away your banking. This is what's happened in the UK. Think of the leader of one of the biggest political parties, Nigel Farage. He was debanked because the bank didn't like his political views. So there's a real heavy-handedness coming through, particularly these woke progressive groups. And the BNZ, sadly, is one of them. So look, just take note. If you're with the BNZ, maybe you want to think about alternatives. But it's an arrogance and an absurdity on their part. They were going to debank a coal mine by 2030, so in 5 years' time, because it helps them with their climate goals. And I'm just jumping back to topic because Elaine's nailed it. There we go. She says, children are children. To my mind, culture has no bearing on where to place the child when they're removed from parents. The only thing, I can't read the whole thing. Let me say, the only thing is that they're safe. Look, absolutely. I mean, where we can, without getting too much into it, where we can, you try to respect culture because that's part of who the child is. So for me personally, and we do foster care, respecting the family from which the child comes from, understanding their needs, their culture, their stories, is so vitally important. But if the interests of the child trump elements of culture or family, then that's what, as you are saying, Elaine, comes first. And one of the reasons we have so many children abused in this country and moving between so many homes is an obsession to put them back with family. And often the families, in the widest sense, are broken. And prioritising the cultural need over a safe environment as you nail it. And that's the problem. In fact, there was that court case, I think we talked about it on Solid Ground last year, and I've forgotten the name of the family, who had been looking after a child for like 8 years, happy from when the child was a baby, happy, stable family, but in the name of culture, the child was ripped off them and effectively given to strangers. I think Amanda's right. I mean, just be aware of what these sort of groups are up to, like the BNZ in this case, or trying to be. As I say, good on, in this case, New Zealand First stepping in and putting a bill to stop this debanking dynamic, because it's just becoming more and more problematic. I thought I'd just quickly show this. Some of you will know I write a Substack, so substack.com. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about the terribly grotesque behaviour of Hamas, and of course that's been proven even more now. Those skeletal figures they released a few days ago looking like survivors of the Holocaust, just absolutely appalling, including telling one man, he speaks about looking forward to seeing his wife and children, I think, or his wife and his mother, and the terrorists, these Hamas lunatics, start laughing because unbeknownst to this hostage being released, they'd murdered them. But it's grotesque, as I say, but I'm just drawing your attention to this, that the hostages are telling us what we already knew, is that Hamas is hiding in UN facilities, they're hiding in schools and hospitals. So it's just a small aside. You won't read much of this in New Zealand media, but I think it's important that you hear it here. And as I said, I wrote about it the other week, about just how grotesque Hamas is. And now the ceasefire is falling apart. Hamas is no longer following the rules. I have no doubt that John Minto and his lunatic mates are out there on the streets still protesting of all the terrible things that they think Israel's doing, when in fact it's their Islamic lunatic terrorist groups like Hamas, which are part of it. The media too, very quick as we come to the end, are very upset that Donald Trump has believers here. So, as I say, they're upset he's got his God squad. I think that's overcooking it, because they don't seem to have any problem that I can see with what was there before. So it's a bit like New Zealand politics. It doesn't matter if you're a cultural Marxist or highly atheistic. that's perfectly fine. But if you're someone who actually believes in God and prays, oh my Lord, it's a terrible, terrible problem. So I just thought that was sort of a funny, for me, place to end. So yeah, I just thought it was funny. Again, the inability in this case for media to understand what's happening, or rather self-reflection is what I'm trying to say. As I say, when there's a non-God squad, non-believing or non-praying people, that's perfectly acceptable. Personally, I haven't actually seen much evidence of them being particularly religious in that sense. They're just actually putting forward pretty good centre-right policies. So, yeah, very good. Guys, a few little updates. I'll let you know. Obviously, I still continue to do my work on RCR. I sat down last week with Professor Paul Moon. We talked about Waitangi Day, its various origins. So actually, what happened on Waitangi Day? Did you know it was actually meant to be signed on the 7th of February, but actually it ended up, as we know, on the 6th. I also did last week a podcast with David Kuman. We were actually talking Israel, and we talk a little bit, obviously, around the hostages, but also around elements of free speech and so forth. And then this week, in a few hours, I'm going to release this conversation with Melissa Oden. She's that abortion survivor that I mentioned. So pretty amazing chat with her around, obviously, her lobbying. So far unsuccessful in the United States to have laws put in place to support abortion survivors. But she also talks about the March for Life, the executive orders that are pro-life. Quite a great conversation. So that's really, really cool. As I mentioned too, we do Substacks. So this is substack.com. This meant to say at the top, charity begins at home, because I did it was on something that JD Vance said. In fact, I'll play the video for you quickly, because this is what he said, and then I've written about it.
But there's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society.
Oh, thank you. So I always... I've got this manual mute button. I've got to work out a way so I can see it's on. Anyway, I was just saying, I think JD Vance is right, and I've written this Substack to talk about why he's correct. So, as you say, JD talks about love being ordered, and if you want some Latin for the day, it's called the Ordo Amoris, the order of love, because yet we're called to love everybody, but that's clearly humanly impossible. And so what's important is, you do start by loving your family, your friends, your immediate neighbours, and, like most of us, if not all of us, do charity into the wider community. But I also note the inversion that JD Vance talks about is very much present in progressive politics. And so I write all about that in Substack. So if you again jump into substack.com, look up my name or On Point, you will find my writing. And before I realised I was on mute, I was saying that Bob does a Substack as well. Just look up his name or Mick Blog and check out his writing. This is a slightly older one. It's a slightly older one. Bob is prolific. So I normally write once a week. Bob is doing one almost every day. So check out Bob's there. And then just so you know, there's a pile of other material that we here at Family First are involved with. So I'll just share that with you now.
If you're looking for news that you can trust, commentary on key family and social issues, and conservative conversations, go no further. Family First has them all. Monday nights, live at 8 p.m, Straight Talk with our panel. Tuesday mornings, live at 8 a.m, Solid Ground with Simon O'Connor. Wednesdays, watch for the latest episode of Pulse Point to drop. We watch the news so that you don't have to. Thursdays, live at 5 p.m, Political Playback with Bob McCoskrie and Simon O'Connor discussing the week in Parliament and politics in general. Plus, there's regular episodes of social commentary with McBlog and interviews on family matters throughout the week. You can watch these live and also on demand on our website, Facebook page, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on our YouTube channel. Finally, something worth watching that you can trust. Go to familyfirst.watch for more details.
So as I say, guys, no shortage. Sorry, just checking that I'm off mute. No shortage of content. As I say, I have to say I love doing this. Love all the comments. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts, including telling me that once again I've muted myself. That's not a tech failure. That's a common Simon failure. Political Playback this Wednesday, live at 5 o'clock. You'll know it's normally on a Thursday. But this is on Wednesday this week because actually Bob and I are off to a conference in London called ARC, A-R-C. Look up ARC Forum and you'll see everyone from the Jordan Petersons to the Constantine Christens to the Douglas Murrays and Tony Abbotts, and a whole lot of people are going to be there. So we're looking forward to that. So Political Playback. Sunny Side Up says, when is Straight Talk started? I think it's next Monday. Actually, it's probably the Monday after, actually. It's probably not next Monday, but the Monday after. As I say, Bob and I are away. But stay tuned on social media in case I've got that wrong. But Straight Talk is coming back. I want to stress that. Straight Talk is coming back. I'm hoping I'll do a Solid Ground next week. As I say, I am travelling. That could have an effect. So I'll keep you up to date through socials. But otherwise, guys, lovely to have you here this morning. Great that the tech worked, and I just hope you all have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thanks for joining me here on Solid Ground.
If you're looking for news that you can trust, commentary...